Hello, I'm Riley, and this is the Diegetic Advancement Podcast. Okay, just a quick midweek episode. Going to recap turn 2 of the war game and talk about my ongoing DCC campaign. Okay, let's recap the war game. Same 4 players. Again, thank you all for participating. A fairly quiet turn though. Some bold moves from the players, and yet we just ended up with a lot of close calls. Either a force just moving off a node before another force arrived, or taking paths where they just walk by each other. We just had 2 instances of opposition forces meeting. In one case, a small force avoided detection using the evasion rules, and then we had one large and decisive battle, which went very badly for one of our players. Mirke and Jason's forces met, both heading for a node. So they fought for control, and ultimately Mirke's forces were victorious. I feel really bad, though, for what happened to Jason. His force had spent most of their movement at this point, and he vastly outnumbered Mirke's forces. And yet the luck of the dice was not on his side, like really bad, and he was forced off. The injury rolls were kind, though, so he'll be returning at almost full force for the final turn, I think. The standings at the end of turn 2 and going to the final turn are Mirke in a strong position in first, followed by Bobby, then Daniel, and then after a rough turn, Jason in last place. So I've got some more learnings from this turn that I'll be taking back to the drawing board. I think the movement is a bit too restrictive, especially with the timings, where I've sort of set it up so that you've really only got a certain amount of movement in your turn before the turn's over. It really only leads to a single expedition in and back. So I think I might remove that restriction altogether in the future and just give a movement rate to each group and have turns be shorter spans of time. The reason to return to the gate would then be to deposit. There's a risk and reward element there. Do you bank the resources, take time, or go further? Additionally, including some movement rate differentiation in the overland portion based on the unit makeup would be good. At the moment, everyone moves at the same rate until we get into the skirmish, which leads to less tactical differences. And in addition, the map is quite uniform and symmetrical, so forces often end up at the same place at the same time. You can't rush to get somewhere ahead of your opponent. Lastly, the hexes are probably too fine grained. Having fewer will likely simplify play, not have so many instances where people just walk past each other. I'm not sure that I'll come back to this scenario straight away, but I will return to it eventually, with likely some big changes. Which brings me to the question, what shall I do next? If anyone has suggestions for this play-by-post map-based wargame campaigning, especially my players, I'd love to hear it. I'll likely be sticking to fantasy, but the options I have in mind now are something like outdoor survival, or maybe a dungeon crawl, or perhaps a traditional war scenario, taking control of territories. I'll be getting the after action report out to the players just after I record this podcast, probably before it releases. So we'll have the final turn update in a couple of weeks' time. Now on to DCC. We had a new player join after missing the first session, and one player who made the first couldn't make it to the second one. But it looks like we'll have a good core of players. We'll see how things pan out as we go forward, and I'll likely reopen recruiting to get another player or two soon, as the advice I've often heard is to always be recruiting. A lot of that will depend on the next session though, which I'll get to. So how'd the session go? I was playing the module Frozen in Time, and I'll try to keep the spoilers pretty light, but if you don't want any at all, jump ahead to about 6 minutes 35. Basic premise is that you're recruited by a tribe of barbarians to clear out the ice demons from a glacier which has recently collapsed. What you actually find is a long forgotten futuristic facility buried in the ice. I've written this module once before and I struggled with it, and I struggled this time as well. Likely should have learnt from my mistakes, but oh well. I find it really hard to describe the scenes trying to keep things mysterious. Describing things like plasteel, electric lights, and machinery in a way that mimics what the characters would be seeing just leads to confusion, which makes sense, but I don't think it actually feels good for the players to be constantly confused by my description. Now, part of that is likely on me, but that confusion I feel like is kind of intended by the module. There's a lot of encounters that aren't great as well. Anti-interaction. You eat some fruit, you're very likely to die, which doesn't really make the players want to interact with things. Same with the machinery. It's mostly bad stuff happening or nothing at all. Again, I've run this before. I should have changed it up, but the premise is good and there are some good encounters. There's a time machine, and if you activate it, the characters go through and are lost to time. Of course, everyone is going to jump through, so do you just end the campaign? This is probably the worst culprit in the module, and you really need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and work out how you're going to handle things ahead of time. First time I ran it, I came up with a decent premise. They ended up in a futuristic society with time police, so I got to run around a little bit before being captured and sent back. I'd do something like that again, cut it, or be ready to completely change the campaign and send them to anomalous subsurface environment or something like that. I'd hoped to finish the module in the single session, and there's a mechanic that helps you do this, but the confusing descriptions really slowed play down, and so we'll stretch it out over the 2 sessions. There were a lot of laughs, and I had a good time, so whilst I'm generally negative on the module as written, I think it was a good session. As I said, there are some really good encounters, and that leads me to next session. We'll play out the module. There are some great encounters left, so that should be fun. And then we're just going to get some feedback from players. Initially, I'd advertised a 3 to 4 session game as a low commitment trial of DCC, advertising to new players or people who were only experienced in 5e. So I want to know what people think about DCC, the sessions this far, and what we want to do from here. I had been running official modules because I think they give a good taste of what DCC is really about, but I'll likely open the game up into more of a sandbox going forward. But we'll see what the players want to do. I'm looking forward to continuing, but interested to see what form that takes, and I will provide an update on that in a couple of weeks' time. I think we're playing in next Tuesday, so not that long from now. Yeah, that's all the updates I wanted to have this week, but I do have a call from Mirke responding to my attempt at showcasing how I plot the orders out for the war game. So I'll let that play out.
Hey Riley, this is Mirke. That's how I suspected you were handling our movement, so nice to have that confirmation. I had no problem with you sharing that. Uh, I'm sure it would have been more helpful to put the hexes in, but you didn't want to reveal anything, which I suppose at this late date probably wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But yeah, it's all good. Uh, I appreciate how you are handling this bout of the war game. Like you were just getting into it and you kept the scope small. Yes, it's fairly simple objectives and everything, but this was a great way to get your feet wet. I'm having a nice time. It's enjoyable for me. It's like you said, it doesn't require a lot of commitment, and it seems that's a good thing because it takes us a while to get our orders in. Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate how you're handling things. I'm certainly interested in how you expand it as well, but for now, it's all good. Thanks. Take care.
Okay, thanks for the kind words and the call, Mirke. Yeah, I agreed that hex numbers would have been handy to visualize, and I had tried to record a video, but I don't have a mount for my phone or anything, so watching the recording after the fact gave me motion sickness. Maybe one day I'll get something set up. Yeah, whilst I'm perfectly happy with the pace, making the game any more complicated or fine-grained risks putting a lot of pressure on you guys who are busy, and I sort of sold it as low commitment. I'm sure adding that would make for a great experience, but it's potentially a large ask. I think I will try something like that in the future, but I have to spend some more time recruiting. Um, I've really enjoyed getting my feet wet. Really only dabbled in some social 40k games prior to this, and board games potentially count, at least some of them. But I am very new to the hobby, so I think it's been a good experience. I'm having fun, learning a lot, and it's getting me to actually play. The input from the players and the callers have been an extra bonus. I wouldn't be learning so much if I was just doing this in a vacuum. So I appreciate the call and the effort that goes into playing. Now, Merck's got a lot going on over on his podcast, so I'd highly encourage you to check it out. There'll be likely a day or two left to call in with any thoughts on Dungeon Delicious Episode 1. So if you want to get involved in sort of the review, retrospective episodes on that, go watch the episode and call in. Otherwise, just check out the show when that's out. Otherwise, there's a whole bunch of other good stuff going on over on Merck's podcast, and the links to that will be in the show notes. Anyway, that's all there is for this short midweek installment. I'll talk to you all again in the next episode, which will likely be a continuation of the diegetic advancement episodes. I've got some great calls on the topic, and if I can find the time, I'll detail some actual rules rather than just rambling about the theory. I know I talked a lot about enjoying systems, and then I don't present one. So I'll see if I can get anything done before then. Otherwise, I'll just be wrapping up some thoughts on that. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later. If anyone is listening, I'd love to hear your feedback. You can reach me via Spotify, SpeakPipe, Discord, or email. Details, along with everything I've talked about today, are in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.